So we're in London, and David's here, and he's going to talk to us about the cinematic side of Far Cry Primal. How do you keep a setting that's so different to previous Far Cry games? How do you keep that feeling like a Far Cry game?
That was pretty much the first challenge we looked at when I was told the game was going to take place in the Stone Age, and they wanted everything to be in another language. So we started doing research on media that's out there, and I noticed right away that a lot of the media that I found was very sort of caveman-esque and sort of ape-like, and not really truthful to the research we were getting. So immediately we started looking for experts to help us realize this fantasy. So we worked with linguists from the University of Kentucky who had been studying and teaching ancient English languages, as a doctorate student. And they helped us create 3 different languages, and they helped us translate our scripts into that language. They coached our actors via Skype before our acting sessions, and they were present on set with us while we were shooting. So we took that language and we started working with a movement coach named Terry Notary. You might recognize from Planet of the Apes. Terry was really busy at the time, but when he found out about the project, agreed to come in on weekends and do workshops for all of our actors. And it forced us to ask the question, like, what is Primal? Or what does Primal look like? What does it feel like? And we knew it didn't look anything like the contemporary self that we have. And Terry really helped us define a foundation for all the characters, and then a tribal signature for each tribe. And I think what we learned during that session was that, as living in 2015, we all sort of live in our prefrontal cortex, in tomorrow and in yesterday, and it's full of tension and anxiety, and that in the Stone Age, people were living in the present. They were now. They were not in that other space, and that created this sort of awareness that actually that made people look different. They walked different. They had a different way of moving their body. So Terry worked with all of our cast, basically deconstructing them and sort of pulling us out of this contemporary view and connecting us to each of the tribes. So we combined the language with the work we did with Terry, and then we came up with a new camera system to author our scenes, which is we used like a cameraman with a 3D printed camera. I put like a GoPro camera right between the eyes of my cameraman, and we gave him like an LCD screen just under the lens. So all of the scenes that we did in the volume, we knew had to be extremely visual and have like a strong CSA, because we wanted to pretend no one's going to read the subtitles. We want people to understand the scenes without that. So we staged everything to camera and came up with this pillar for our cinematics, which is touched by the world. So whenever someone could touch the car, or whenever the NPCs could interact with each other or touch a prop or a set, it would meet our pillar, and it would help us sort of bring the visual part of the story and the context behind the scenes. So those 3 things really combined to help us really realize the fantasy. And the last thing we did, I learned from an acting coach in Los Angeles who does this. I guess it's kind of like new age acting coach, where you'll run a scene emotively. So instead of running the scene saying the language in Pi, they actually run the scene and they say how they feel, like what the emotion is behind the scene. So the scene becomes a series of movements, like choreography between the camera and the actors and the other actors, and they're just saying things in English that come to mind about how they're feeling, the emotion or the spline of the scene. And we run it over and over and over again, so that even the boom operator and our reference cameramen know what the scene is about. We switch to the language, and then we have the actual language anchored in the emotion of the scene and anchored in their movement. So all that sort of came together to realize the fantasy.
Okay.
That's a big answer, right?
It was a good answer. It was a good answer. One of the things that's kind of really stands out about the Far Cry franchise or the series is the characters. They're big characters, they're bold characters. But like you say, you're working with a limited language, you're working across 3 tribes. How do you bring those characters to life with all of the restrictions that you just kind of detailed?
Yeah, well, the writers on Far Cry really delivered in terms of our antagonists. So it's really a combination of working with the writing team and the character team to create bios and great concept art for the actors. But it's also working with the actors. I think releasing yourself from the bio and finding those punched out larger-than-life characters in Far Cry, that are, a bit insane, a bit what the fuck, it's a bit of everything, right? And I think that's sort of a legacy of the brand, and going in, this is my first Far Cry project. Going in, that was sort of a big weight on my shoulders, knowing that we really had to find these characters, and I wanted them to be truthful and not cartoony. So I definitely think that working with the language and the movement gave us all the tools to really bring these characters out. I think, as in any medium, characters are defined by their choices and actions, and the writers have given us a big buffet to work with, so it'll be powerful.
With the last two games, core games, I should say, especially, the way that the games were presented hinged a lot on that chief antagonist. They were kind of almost synonymous with the game itself, but we haven't had that same kind of push this time around. It feels a bit more kind of evenly balanced. Would you say that's fair?
Oh yeah, I would say we've really, now that we've introduced nature as an antagonist, the predators in the world, I think that balances really well with the other two tribes, the Azila and the Udam. In the Udam tribe, you've got Ul, who's leading that tribe, and he's your main antagonist from the north, and Batari, who's the queen of the Azila tribe, and she's a major antagonist. I think that it's spread out, and I think it's balanced for the game, and I think that it's really allowing the player to tell the story their way, whichever route they want to take, whichever antagonist they want to take on first.
It's a very systemic game. There's lots of different features kind of colliding and working together in harmony. Obviously, story is one of those as well. How have you linked the narrative of the game through kind of like the systems and the way that you kind of expand your kind of reach through the game?
Well, first game I ever worked on was for EA, and it was a Need for Speed game. And I had this problem for cinematics when I was have a cinematic playing the game, but the police would show up and arrest me right in the middle of the cinematic. And in Far Cry, the problem is during a cinematic, an animal will come up and eat my character in the open world. So when it comes to systems, it's really challenging doing cinematics in Far Cry because there's so many systems interacting in so many ways. It's something that we really want to exploit because that's what makes the open world so incredible. I think when you want to measure up with the open world visuals in a Far Cry cinematic, we try to add as many of those elements in the scene as we can, controlled in the village. And it was a huge challenge, and it was something that we knew right away that we didn't want our scenes to feel different from the open world realization. We wanted them to feel part of it, and so we definitely included animals in our realization and our scenes, and we've textured them with lots of dynamic elements that are really rich. So I'm really proud of that.
Okay, last question before we go. In as few words as possible, tell us the plot to the game, the basic spoiler-free plot at least.
Okay, 10,000 BC. You are Takar, Northern European hunter. You are from the Wenja tribe. You're part of a small group of hunters in search of Oros, a sacred valley. Your journey and story as the player is to get to Oros, to go from hunted to be the hunter, to resettle the Wenja and become the Beastmaster.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.